It's the summer of 2000. A young Capcom game director named Shu Takumi is approached with an opportunity to produce his very own video game. And upon hearing those words, Takumi knew exactly what he wanted to create. You see, ever since he was a kid, he was fascinated by the mystery genre from Sherlock Holmes to Lupin III. And now, the self-proclaimed big mystery nerd could finally create the mystery game of his dreams. But he also wanted to create something new. A spin to a genre of classic detective mystery adventures like Sherlock or Lupin. And over the next 10 months with a small team of 7, they labored away at making that game a reality. A simple murder mystery adventure title of solving puzzles and confronting witnesses and their lies. And who better to lead the helm for the future of detective mystery than a lawyer? In 2001, the game would be finally released for the Game Boy Advance. Little to his knowledge, Takumi's game would soon become a cultural icon in gaming history. That game, of course, being And currently, 2 decades and 11 games later, Ace Attorney remains as prevalent as ever. A beloved series that will influence many other things from Danganronpa to a freaking Pixar movie. But it's fascinating to me because despite how popular the series is, the games themselves don't reflect that success. I mean, yeah, there's psychos like myself, but Ace Attorney isn't really your Street Fighters or Resident Evils. Yet, everyone still knows what Ace Attorney is. We know who Phoenix Wright and Miles Edgeworth are, we know all the music and the sounds, and we can't forget them. Not to mention how abundant this series is as a whole. Fan art, animations, cultural references, Phoenix Wright vs Saul Goodman. Game theory literally uses every single asset Ace Attorney has, yet still can't make a better theory video for them. The point is, the series has almost transcended the games themselves and transformed into this cultural icon. But that's the magic of Ace Attorney. Takumi may not have predicted how big these games would have gotten, but he made damn sure he would make them timeless. He wanted a game that would last, and one so simple that, quote, even his non-gamer mother could pick it up and play it. But with a team of just 7 people with limited technology and a restrictive video game genre, the game couldn't just be simple. In order to fulfill all Takumi's ambitions, they had to be smart with their simplicity. The visual novel style is infamous for how simple it is. I mean, the name says it for itself, it's just a novel with pictures to it. Sure, there's a lot of variety to them, but it's a genre that's easily perceived to just be a couple PNGs plastered on top of some JPEGs. Maybe if you're lucky, you could gamble your life savings away for those PNGs. And while visual novels have significantly evolved over the past several years, at the time of production, they were merely basic, often erotic text simulators. But Ace Attorney was different, mostly because their utilization of the visual aspect of the novels. In fact, the style of Ace Attorney is probably the biggest contributor to the series' success, perfectly portraying the whimsical nature of the series. And that's a lot to do with the work of Takumi and lead graphical artists Tatsuro Iwamoto and Kamiko Suekuni. Shu Takumi was on record as wanting to leave an impression on players just from a single glance. And one of the most notable examples being Takumi's adamancy to make Phoenix and Edgeworth stand out, giving each a recognizable silhouette and color palette, something they would also use to portray their contrasting roles and personalities. And that attention to detail has arguably made them have the most famous silhouette and color scheme in gaming history. I mean, the finger point is practically synonymous with Ace Attorney just from how iconic the pose was.
And do the point.
And this is a constant among all of these characters. These simple designs that are uniquely vibrant in their own way. Maya's bubbly nature to Mia's warm yet stoic demeanor, or Franziska's impulsive and arrogant attitude to Godot's mysterious and intimidating presence. And yes, even the nut jobs are designed accordingly. But they take these designs a step forward with their mastery of dynamicism and exaggeration. New Frame Plus already made an excellent video breaking down this point in their animation Ace Attorney video, so I'll keep this brief. But the way they illustrate all of their sprites is simply immaculate. They have these expressive emotions and striking poses that say a lot about the characters as well as their personalities and emotions. These sprites are visually stunning with how animated they seem even from a static pose. And the best part is that implied emotion from these poses allows them to keep cartridge space to a minimum while maximizing the charm of these characters. But the layers of this Ace Attorney onion keep going deeper, as the animation of Ace Attorney follows the same principle. A concept known as limited animation, something New Frame Plus also broke down in their video. You see, despite the aforementioned implied emotion, these sprites actually have some animation to them, though they're only limited to being a couple frames long. It can be a complex movement or the mouth talking or just the eyes blinking. It ain't much, but it makes a hell of a difference. It further exemplifies these already dynamic sprites, guiding our attention towards the most important aspects, and thus allows the body language to do the talking, once again showcasing these characters' differing personas and emotions. And these motions are the final link that really makes these characters feel alive. They're not just some picture or PNG anymore, but rather an actual moving, breathing person. All accomplished just from adding an extra 2 or 3 frames. And that's what I find so impressive about this limited style. Who needs your 60 or 120 frames per second when you can literally just use 2 and our brains fill in the rest? It's a fascinating demonstration of the versatility of animation and how so much can be accomplished from so little. And because of all of this, the simplicity of the visuals become the strength of the story itself. A lot of visual novels have ironically been very lackluster in terms of visual storytelling. The cycling of the same assets over and over again can quickly become very repetitive. However, the overall simplicity also means that even the smallest of changes feel groundbreaking in comparison, again accomplishing more with less. And even besides the sprites themselves, Ace Attorney still has many tools at their disposal which they use to their fullest extent. Color shifted text highlighting important statements and evidence, screen shakes emphasizing dialogue or simulating the feeling of being punched, grayscaling isolating and tensing moments up. So many elements mixed together to accomplish what is often difficult within the genre. Show, not tell. Visuals are made to support the narrative by supplying what words cannot. We see how these characters transform more and more under pressure to the point of even breaking and revealing a new side to them. And it makes a testimony versus someone like Red White feel more like a Street Fighter boss than anything else. Just with some nerd shit like reading and evidence, ugh. And as said before, it only takes a small change to make a big impact. Entire moments are defined just from those subtle changes. It's most famous with the iconic breakdowns, but it can range from a unique sprite to just adding an extra couple in-betweens. One of the most emotional moments from the games is literally just them adding red pixels onto a sprite. And of course, I can't forget. These visuals may seem rather rudimentary at first, but it's how they stack all of these elements on top of one another where the complexity from the simplicity shines. Its unique look and feel is why the series has remained timeless to this day, circumventing all of their limitations and turning it into their strength. That's the power of simplicity, and something that would usher in a new standard for visual novels and arguably gaming as a whole. Once again, if you want a true deep dive into all of this, New Frame Plus's video does an excellent job unpacking everything, so please check it out. However, visuals are only one element of this game. In fact, there's another one of our 5 key senses that they use to their advantage. Music and sound is often considered to be the universal language of the world. The ability to convey any feeling or emotion through several auditory functions is such a powerful tool that, if done right, can orchestrate an entire story on its own. And the Ace Attorney team knew this, and with their limited resources, what's more effective at making the experience feel grander without adding significantly more than creating some incredible fun music. And so, composers Mazukazu Sugimori and later Noriyuki Iwadare crafted the now iconic Ace Attorney themes. Your pursuit themes, objections, character themes. Yes, even the blue. Now I know absolutely nothing about music theory, and there's plenty others who do. But the beauty of music is that you don't need to know anything to still feel it. When the defended lobbies play, I feel like I'm in the lobby awaiting a trial. When the pursuit themes play, I feel like I'm a part of some heavy action pursuit. And when Very Big Circus plays, I realize why circuses no longer exist. The same goes with the character themes. In fact, the themes are as influential to the characters as the designs themselves, adapting their personalities, aesthetics, and even stories into a song. Whether it's the smoothness of Fragrance of Dark Coffee, the somber sweetness of Turnabout Sisters, not to mention Guilty Love, Joking Motive, or any of the other incredible themes, they are in many ways the epitome of the characters they're representing. But it's one thing to just have good music, it's another thing to allow the music to evolve with the story or even within the tracks themselves. There can be multiple different versions to several songs, most evident with the questioning themes transitioning from moderato to allegro. And this evolution of tracks makes us feel involved within the case, enforcing the growing developments during the investigations or the snowballing intensity of the trials. And similarly with the character themes, they have these alternative versions that bring a new depth into these characters. They still retain a similar melody or style, but twist them to create a different perspective from our initial perception of them. And it makes these alternative tracks some of the most powerful in the series, making these already likable characters even more compelling. But really, the most important aspect is that the soundtrack is just fun. I'd argue that the main gameplay mechanic of Ace Attorney is the music. Nothing matches that adrenaline rush than when the music accelerandos from moderato to allegro to presto, or the blood pumping from the pursuit theme racing along, or the sudden sinking feeling when the music, or the installation of the relief when the confetti flies. It's exhilarating, it's liberating. It makes you become the moment itself, as if you're the one slamming desks yelling objections. What's more, they accomplish all of this while still embracing their simplistic nature. These tracks are still the classic 8-bit looping melodies, but they are orchestrated in a way that still emanates so much emotion behind them. Maybe even more so because of it, allowing the tracks to be more easily recognized and comprehended. And that mix of vibrance, variety, and versatility is why the soundtrack has grown beyond the games as well. Why these themes are used everywhere online, especially on YouTube for videos and commentary, which has made my life a whole lot easier because of it. But it doesn't stop with just the music. They once again went the extra mile with the sound effects and dialogue. The animations or effects just wouldn't be the same if we didn't hear those desks slamming or poses striking or screens shaking or booms, crashes, thuds, shocks, onomatopoeia. These effects are dynamic and are once again another element that brings the scene to life. It's hard to exactly determine why they are so effective, but there's this distinct impact behind the sound effects that really makes them pop. It could be their sharp tones or instant executions or reverberating impacts. Whatever the case may be, these sounds are effective at interrupting the scene to provide that much more detail to the world. And none of them are more infamous than the actual dialogue of the game. The objections, hold its, take that's, all complemented with this thunderous speech bubble. They're just so perfect. Gotcha! The power behind each of their voices makes of how distinctive they are from one another. It's just so satisfying every single time. I can listen to all of this yelling any day of the week. It's even more beautiful knowing that one of the most famous sound effects in gaming history was just the developers yelling into a microphone. Fun fact, you can credit Godot's voice actor to Devil May Cry creator Hideki Kamiya. But in my opinion, those aren't even the most important pieces of dialogue in the game. Do you hear that? Yes, those subtle millisecond-long blips are the most important pieces of audio in the game. I know, that's a pretty large proclamation, but they really are that instrumental. You see, with a game with this much reading and dialogue, there needs to be something to help guide you along through all of that stuff so you don't lose interest or have everything meshed together into nothingness. And these text blips do just that. In fact, these blips are truly what gives our characters their voices. Not even just figuratively, they have two distinct tones from male and female characters. There's different paces they're played at, which gives this almost rhythm to the text, just like how we cadence and articulate our sentences in real life. These blips are literally the metronomes of dialogue, and its subtle yet powerful presence is enough for us to interpret the text as actual dialogue. and really makes us immersed into these characters as if we're having a true conversation with them. And the cherry on top is that Ace Attorney was one of the first major games to use speech blips, and its success would then inspire many other games to do the same, creating their own different spins to them from Celeste to Undertale. It just goes to show how impactful sound design is for video games, which is a shame as it's also one of the more easily overlooked aspects of them. We never really realize how impactful sound effects are until they're entirely absent. Like, I've played a lot of games where there's no sound effects or blips with the text or music or anything, and every single time, the experience just feels empty. Sound design is what builds the scene, the emotion, the character. It's not something that should be ignored. It completes the moment while also emphasizing all other elements of the game. And it really does make the game and story so much more investing as a result. That's what Ace Attorney excelled at, and it's why Ace Attorney remains standing at the pinnacle of video game music and sound design. For a series with the longevity of Ace Attorney, it's inevitable that the series will evolve. But the idea of modernization can go against the strength of the games of old, their simplicity. So time and again, this improvement of the game can instead destroy those simple qualities that made it so initially appealing. So surely Ace Attorney will also fall under those same faults of other games, right? Well, yes and no. There have certainly been times where evolution has significantly harmed Ace Attorney games, most evident with the gameplay. While I'd argue that the story, the visuals, the audio are far more important than the gameplay itself, at the end of the day, what's advertised in the box is the funny lawyer video game. You can't really market a game solely on aesthetics alone. There has to be something new and flashy to grab people's attention. And this clearly was an issue as early as Justice for All starting with this thing, the Magatama, which is basically your more spiritual lie detector. And as flawed as the Magatama is, in retrospect it's quite a welcomed addition, working as this checkpoint station to give direction to the player during investigations. It was simple, it didn't impede upon pacing much, and it helped improve the less entertaining half of cases. If tinkered at just a little bit more, it could have easily become one of the highlights of the game. But instead, it would all begin flying off the rails. With each subsequent game, they kept clustering in more and more mechanics with hit or miss results. Worst part is, these flashy new game mechanics were honestly just redundant methods to the Magatama. Detecting lies through sight, emotion, spirit pulls, fucking chess.
White sacrificed the rook!
They were supposed to be these revolutionary updates, but instead, they just came across as these dumb gimmicks with mixed execution. Probably the most infamous example of this being the divisive case Rise from the Ashes, the bonus case made for when the trilogy ported over to the DS. A case that may be one of the best written cases in the entire series, with a unique setup, cast characters, and twists and turns. Yet, all that greatness is muddled by the fact that you have to trudge through so much broken garbage to get to that. It really does feel like they had this playbench of DS mechanics and just threw everything together and shipped it out. And what resulted from it is this strange love child of the most obnoxious puzzles anyone would have to deal with in any video game. I could go on about the unskippable security footage or the endless rotation of the jar. Not to mention the walking science/3DS encyclopedia Emma Sky.
And let me tell you something else, this ain't chemistry, okay? This is art. Cooking is art, and the shit I cook is the bomb, so don't be telling me.
It's the most non-Ace Attorney case in the series. For better, but mostly for worse. All because the plethora of infuriatingly complex mechanics that breaks the entire flow of the case. That's not to say that evolution is bad, quite the contrary. Ace Attorney may have been brilliant for how it turned its limitations into its strengths, but the series' growth and popularity, as well as the advances to technology from the Game Boy Advance to the DS to the 3DS and now modern consoles, besides Xbox because screw Xbox apparently, those limitations are practically non-existent. And as aforementioned in previous sections, the simplicity of Ace Attorney basically welcomes change and innovation. And there certainly were a lot of great or at least respectable improvements to the Ace Attorney formula in later games. But for them to work, they need to be logical improvements that follows the fundamentals from previous games, rather than radical changes with rocky implementations. Look at the series transition to 3D for instance. In many ways, it was a great improvement, introducing 3D evidence and environments we can explore around, as well as whatever Emma's cooking up in her forensics kit.
Yes, science!
However, there were also a lot of problems when jumping from 2D to 3D. The new models and animations opened the opportunity to having more complex motions and fluidity within the sprites. Yet ironically enough, they became more hollow and less animated from the originals as a result. Mostly because these 3D animations lost those little elements that made the old sprites so dynamic, like exaggeration and timing. And in general, it just didn't feel like the same old Ace Attorney as when it was 2D.
Yup, because my cords of steel.
It was a radical technological shift at the cost of the rooted charm from previous games. However, while the 3D was clearly rough around the edges, they were definitely heading into the right direction, which would all eventually be showcased in Takumbi's magnum opus, The Great Ace Attorney. A duology in which, while on the surface is drastically different from the original trilogy, at its core it's still vintage Ace Attorney and then some. Sure, the visuals are improved, the music is complex, and the gameplay is intricate. However, what makes all those elements truly great is that they're built upon the original's simple nature. The animations are smooth and fluid, but they are now more exaggerated and emotional compared to the ones in Dual Destinies. The music has more instrumentation to it, but they still retain a similar melodic style to the original 8-bit melodies. And the new mechanics are unique, fresh, and a lot of fun, but they aren't overly convoluted, but rather feel like an expansion to existing mechanics in the game. Not to mention how even 2 decades later, they still use the exact same sound effects from the GBA era. And that's the most notable aspect of these improvements. It felt like they knew what they needed to change and how to use these new concepts like 3D and modern game engines to enhance the overall Ace Attorney experience, not replace it. Having multiple witnesses on the stand, minor animations in the background locations, animations seamlessly transitioning into one another, characters turning and facing one another, having and actually using depth of field, using multiple camera angles, Ryunosuke having f***ing legs. He's walking around! It's a long list of very minor improvements, all compiled together to enforce that Ace Attorney aesthetic. It's modern enhancements rooted from its traditional groundwork. The Great Ace Attorney really does feel like it took all the strengths and potential from the entire series and packaged them together and expanded upon them. And it's why it feels so fresh, but also so familiar at the same time. Because this game is built more like an improvement and not a reimagination, despite it ironically being a spin-off. In my opinion, the best way to improve is by embracing what worked in the past and applying those strengths onto what needs improvement. The original team emphasized making things simple and easily consumable, to make the experience fun and heartwarming while also not doing too much. And that's what I felt determined what worked compared to what didn't. You don't always need to reinvent the wheel. It's often better to do the little things right instead of making the complex more complicated. Ace Attorney is such a remarkable game because it was born from its limitations. It was an idea that should have failed, yet it didn't, and it thrived because of it. And that's because the closely knitted team of talented individuals that came together and made magic. And that magic they captured from the very beginning still trickles down into every single game in the series and beyond. And the biggest testament of this is how much influence it has even outside of Ace Attorney.
Wait, no. Lame ending? How is that lame? That was awesome. I love Phoenix Wright. It's one of my favorite games. At least the first 2 were, but...
There's so many people who I've never heard of and probably will never play an Ace Attorney game. Yet, they are still equally influenced by this franchise as those who have. And the coup de grace is that their simplicity means that anyone can take these characters or assets and make it their own. There's been so many creative and entertaining media made from, about, or utilizing Ace Attorney and their elements, And despite all the changes, they still consistently convey that joy of Ace Attorney throughout. And it's how I and so many others discovered this series in the first place, just from dumb edits and references I saw online. Though knowing now some people came into the series from Among Us and you know what keeps me up at night. But what grew me to love this franchise is that I saw every ounce of love, passion, and dedication the developers put into their masterpiece. In a lot of ways, Ace Attorney represented what I loved about the media I enjoy. The power of music, animation, characters, creativity, and etc. And witnessing someone else's dream accomplished in a way that seems so feasible. It's a lot of the reason why I continue to push myself, but also continue to share my love for this series that's inspired me so much. In short, Ace Attorney is a masterclass on how to create a compelling narrative by focusing on the little things, and its perfection of the basics will cause it to stand the test of time and make its mark in video game history. Because Ace Attorney is simply genius. Thanks for watching.